4 firefighters, all in their 40s, all described as being in good physical condition. All had a shift of smoky fires. One firefighter came home and walked his dog. He collapsed. He died from cardiac arrest. Another firefighter went to his son's basketball game. He suffered from a cardiac arrest in the stands. He died. A third firefighter exited the structure during a smoky fire and collapsed in front of his incident commander. He spent 2 days in the hospital with various symptoms. He was eventually released and returned to work. 3 weeks later, in his sleep, he died from cardiac arrest. And our final firefighter, he ran out of air and never made it out. His body was recovered from a room where he had pulled off his mask, his hood, and his bunkers. What do these incidents all have in common? Smoke. And to be specific, breathing smoke. And these are just a few of the stories involving the loss of our brothers and sisters. Hundreds more die every year. When firefighters breathe smoke, it has an impact. It might be immediate or 20 years down the road, but each time you breathe smoke, it is pushing you closer and closer to a life-altering event. The entrance to the fire ground does not have to be a one-way trip. If firefighters are aware that smoke is dangerous and filled with dangerous substances, including the toxic twins, hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide, you can work to prevent circumstances that force yourself to breathe smoke. This program will teach you about the need, the mandate, and the solution of prevention through air management, the prevention of breathing smoke, prevention of your suffering and death, and that of your crews, the people that have entrusted their lives to your care, the prevention of your friends and families having to suffer the trauma of losing you forever, a loss from which they will never recover. I'm Mike Gagliano. The modern fireground is one of the deadliest environments in the world. It is a combination of forces and factors that can cripple, kill, or maim in a matter of seconds. Firefighters around the world fight fires in the deadliest circumstances imaginable on a daily basis, armed with only the basic tools of water, protective clothing, and air. Of all these tools, it is air and air alone that allows you to safely enter a burning building and get your job done. It is the lack of air that then can quickly lead to your death on the fire ground.
After working in New Mexico, I went to a town called Coppell, Texas to take over as their fire chief. And about a year into my tenure there, we had a working structure fire, early evening, I'd say 7:30 in the evening. Large 2-story, probably 3,600 square foot home, fire on first and second floors, pretty good extension. Very aggressive fire, very hot fire. Shane was a really big, healthy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed Adonis. His body was a temple, you know, lifting the weights, the whole thing. Carelessly and foolishly, we took our masks off, and everybody's masks were off. We were hitting hot spots. We'd been there for probably 2.5, 3 hours now, and our guard was down. And we go into the garage. I remember turning to Shane, and I said, I saw a little flare-up underneath one of the cars. And I said, you know, hit that. So Shane and another firefighter turned with the hand line, went over to take care of this hot spot by this car. Went back to talking to Ricky. And then I see Shane leave the line and head out the garage door. And I'm like, okay. And you know, maybe I wasn't sure, you know, maybe he was going to get a tool, or he didn't say anything to me. And the next thing I get is my alarm going off on my radio. We have a man down, we have a man down. When I got to the front of the house, Shane was already down on the ground and barely able to breathe. He's a large man, and his whole chest is heaving, and he couldn't breathe. So the medics grabbed him up right away and threw him in the back of the box, and take off to the hospital with Shane. And I said, what happened? And they said, well, when we were hitting that hot spot, we just a bunch of smoke blew back at us, and Shane got a good whiff of it and said he couldn't breathe. He had no asthma. He had nothing like that. I mean, this was a guy this is a really, really healthy guy. And they're pushing air into Shane, and Shane's not able to do anything, and he's turning blue. I mean, he's just not getting air. And he eventually was able to start breathing on his own after about 6-7 hours. Shane, for the next 9 months, fought to get back in shape, to get his wind back, had to start using an inhaler, never got his lung function back to where he felt comfortable with it, and he has since left the fire service.
According to the NFPA, during the years between 2000 and 2009, 138 firefighters died in structure fires, with the leading cause of death being asphyxiation. In that 10-year period, 78 firefighters died of asphyxiation while operating inside at structure fires. All but 3 of the 78 victims were wearing their SCBA. In 2009 alone, the Cyanide Poisoning Treatment Coalition tracked 243 cases of firefighters treated at the scene, transported, or hospitalized due to smoke inhalation. So let's talk about smoke for a moment.
I had a fellow who was a captain who was absolutely legendary in the New York City Fire Department, John Ball, and his words always were, if smoke was good for you, some chief would have bottled it and they'd be selling it by now. So this isn't good for you. They'd be giving it to babies in bottles if it was good for you. Wear your mask. And it didn't take me long to figure that out.
Smoke is filled with many deadly toxicants. However, there are 2 that can kill you almost instantaneously. The difference between these 2 and all of the others is that if they are detected, they're treatable. So if you don't know them, now's a good time to become familiar with the toxic twins: carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide. Hydrogen cyanide and carbon monoxide have a dramatic and devastating effect on your body when introduced through breathing smoke. All the cells in your body need oxygen to keep organs like your brain and heart functioning correctly. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide work together to bring those life functions to a grinding halt. Carbon monoxide inhibits your body's ability to transport oxygen to your cells. And hydrogen cyanide disables the cell's ability to convert that oxygen into energy, effectively suffocating you at the cellular level. Hydrogen cyanide kills your organs, while carbon monoxide kills your blood. Oxygen-hungry organs like the heart and brain suffer first as hydrogen cyanide attacks your body. This is supported by many years of research on smoke inhalation victims that indicate hydrogen cyanide poisoning is a predictable cause of death in closed-space fires. What this means to firefighters experiencing smoke inhalation is very simple. You are breathing smoke. Your body is now under attack, and at a time when you need to be thinking clearly and making the best decisions of your life, the toxic twins are working to disrupt your brain and heart functions. They are working within your body to deprive your brain of oxygen and cause your heart to go into arrhythmias. Just accept it and understand that your only means of preventing exposure to the toxic twins and all of the other smoke toxicants is quite simply your air.
The carcinogens of today's smoke are significantly different than the smoke of, I'm going to say 30 years ago. And basically, I think the smoke of yesterday was basically from cellulose-based materials, wood, wool, paper, cotton, which I'm not going to say it's good, but it's, I think, a lot simpler than today's smoke that is the conventional materials, plus today's smoke, which has a lot more gases, of which hydrogen cyanide is one of the more dangerous. That's 33 times worse than carbon monoxide. So what we've done is, now that we're burning plastics, petrochemical-based compounds, is we're taking all of the elements off of those compounds and adding that to the smoke of yesterday, which is a conventional material. So in my opinion, the smoke of today is twice as worse, and it's probably a lot more than that, but at least twice as worse as the smoke of yesterday because of all the added materials we're burning today that we didn't have yesterday. And so the smoke today is far more dangerous than the smoke of yesterday. My wife and I go in and we sit down and the doctor says, well, he says, you're positive with cancer. And it's, looking back, it's fascinating that, if you have a broken arm, if you have a broken leg, if you hurt something, yeah, we can get that fixed and put you in a cast for a couple of months and get that fixed up. But when a doctor says you have the C word, cancer, that's a different story. And he said, first of all, he says, you're in the prime age period for that to happen. He said, secondly, he said, I see you have a family history of it. And I said, yes, sir, I do. My dad had it, and he was a captain in the Los Angeles Fire Department, and he had prostate cancer. And he said, thirdly, he said, you were a firefighter. He said, so when you add all those things up, he says, you're a prime candidate. And he said, frankly, firefighters are job security for us. And I said, well, why are we firefighters job security for you? He says, well, you stop and think about it. He said, do you guys go into buildings a lot and breathe smoke? And I said, in some cases, yes. He said, and sometimes I see you on top of buildings cutting holes in roofs, and firefighters don't have face pieces on, they're breathing smoke. And I said, yes, that happens sometimes also. He says, you know what happens? You breathe that, he says, it gets in your bloodstream. He says, and then as it goes through your bloodstream, he says, your glands filter that out, which is what they're supposed to do. He said, but, he says, then that material, when it's filtered out, it sits in the glands. He says, and a lot of the smoke today has carcinogens in it. And that's true, yeah. And he says those carcinogens sit there. And he says, at some point in time, he says, and it depends on a lot of factors, he says, then you're in here to see me down the road sometime. So it all goes back to the basic concept of, in the fire service, are you breathing smoke or are you not breathing smoke?
Across the nation, we as firefighters are waking up to the reality that we can no longer treat air as an afterthought. When firefighters breathe smoke, it has an impact. It is going to have a dramatic impact on you, either at the fire or down the road with lasting health effects. So to combat this behavior, mandated changes continue to come to the fire service with a direct focus on air management. The most significant change is the NFPA 1404 respiratory standard, and that took effect in 2007, which mandates every fire department must develop an individual air management program. In conjunction with the NFPA 1404, this program will teach you a simple solution by using the Rule of Air Management, or the ROAM. The great thing about the ROAM is that you can start using it today. You can use it at your fire that you go to tonight, without spending any money, adding any additional staffing, or buying any new fancy equipment for your department. You can use the stuff you have right now. Before I describe the ROAM, let me play you a short clip that will illustrate better than I ever could why the ROAM was developed in the first place.
Command, we have a report of a female victim on the 5th floor on the telephone. She's stuck somewhere.
While battling a high-rise fire in Houston, Texas, Captain Joel Eric Abbott was on the 5th floor of the building searching for victims when he ran into trouble. And he ran out of air.
What floor are you on now?
His first Mayday call was all but drowned out by the chatter of other firefighters engaged in rescues.
Northfield Command, Engine 8, ask for a Mayday on the 5th floor. Are you receiving? Report of 411, 411, 411 fire. Command, are you receiving? On Northfield Command, are you receiving? Calling North Loop Command. We heard firefighter Engine 8A say he was near a window. He said he was near a window. He's trying to talk to you on the radio now, but he can't He can't get in the air. North Loop Command to engine 8A. You're in alarm. Tell me your condition. North Loop Command to engine 8A. Loop Command, when they make contact, let us know. We're going to hold back on these lines on this side, and then we're going to repack. Building off about the 4th floor.
What you've just heard pulls back the veil of what out of air truly sounds like. It's confusing, it's horrifying, and it's led to countless deaths on the fire ground. And the good news is that due to some outstanding rescue work and great decisions by the incident commander, this story has a happy ending. Captain Abbott survived this fire and he's on the job today. The great news is there are things we can do to minimize the chances of ever having to hear this on your fire ground.
What we default to is what we've been trained to do. And I think up until, let me say, just as an example, Southwest, we practiced every Sunday morning doing exterior defensive operations by laying lines and operating master streams around commercial buildings. We never went inside them. I think that one of the abrupt, painful lessons in Southwest were the residential tactics. Is that we were probably pretty typical fire department because I hate to say it this way, we routinely ran out of air at a residential fire. And if you look at attack distances, sort of thermal profiles and those sorts of things, residential fires compared to commercial fires are enormously forgiving. Whereas now you get into commercial attack distances extremely unforgiving. Well, if you've developed a set of habits going into 1,200 square foot single family residences in Maryvale and Phoenix over and over and over and over again. And now what you're doing is you find yourself on a dark and windy afternoon in Southwest supermarkets. That's the payday for that set of bad habits.
NFPA 1404 is the national standard for respiratory training. Due to increased line of duty deaths, injuries, and diseases related to smoke exposure, the committee was compelled to make a change. In spite of tremendous peer pressure, the courageous actions by the committee resulted in the following recommendations regarding your air management program.
This program will develop the ability of an individual to manage his or her air consumption as part of a team during a work period. This can require team members to rotate positions of heavy work to light work so air consumption is equalized among team members. The individual air management program should include the following directives. 1. Exit from an IDLH atmosphere should be before consumption of reserve air supply begins. 2. Low air alarm is notification the individual is consuming their reserve air supply. 3. Activation of the reserve air alarm is an immediate action item for the individual and the team.
It's imperative that you establish a no-nonsense philosophy regarding air management in your program. This has to be a philosophy that cuts no corners and determines that every firefighter will follow it. Whether large or small, volunteer or career, departments across the country are adopting the following key components as foundational elements to ensure their firefighters operate safely with their air. First off, don't ever breathe smoke. Firefighters that routinely breathe smoke should be a thing of the past. The days of the old leather lung, the days of the foot-long snot rockets hanging out after a good working fire should be that of legend and lore. In emergencies or training scenarios, it is a guiding principle that we will not breathe smoke unless it's absolutely unavoidable. This should be a no-brainer because we know without a shadow of a doubt that the modern smoke environment is a toxic mess. It will asphyxiate us, it will cause us to get lost and disoriented, it will poison us, it will give us cancer, and it will kill us. The conclusion should be obvious. For anybody with half a brain, don't breathe smoke.
You know, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that a boss in our business ought to have a zero tolerance for breathing smoke. It's just that simple. And that's pretty much what we said probably, 30 years ago, was members of the Phoenix Fire Department are not allowed to breathe smoke. Any time, any place, any situation, simply don't breathe smoke. So we developed a set of sort of organizational dynamics that supported that. In other words, there was indeed a zero tolerance for a smoke inhalation injury. It was just as simple in the beginning of that change as that it was easier to put on your mask than to deal with me. And you would hear firefighters say, the little bastard isn't going away, so it's just easier to wear your mask and you don't have to go through all those acrobatics that you do after because we used to say it. We didn't do it very much, honestly, as we said that if you're overcome by smoke, we will enter, search, we'll find you, we'll extricate you, we'll treat you, you'll transport you, we'll visit you in the hospital, and then we'll suspend you.
100% of the time, your air should be your responsibility, no one else's. Treat your air with the respect and importance it deserves and never put it in the hands of anybody else. Having someone else monitor it outside, that's just fine. Many countries are doing this and they have great success with it. Having a new piece of equipment to track your air progress is great, but the primary responsibility should and always will rest with you because you are the one who will be breathing the superheated and toxic smoke if something goes wrong and you run out of air. And ultimately, it will be your family who pays the price if you don't come home.
You live with us every day. You're riding backwards, and when you get off that truck, you put that SCBA on, and you're the one that's going in that hazard zone. So you're the business end of everything that's going on in safety, welfare, survival. It ends up with you in the process. It doesn't end up with some 80-year-old guy lecturing everybody. It ends up with the kids who are, and I say that affectionately and respectfully, who are riding backwards, who are going to those fires, and they're actually putting water on those fires. So it's a big deal. So pay attention.
Third, you have to know your equipment. This is no big surprise, but you have to know it inside and out. Take it personally. Check it out. For career personnel, you check your mask at the beginning of each and every shift and after every job. For volunteers, check it on your drill night, whenever you arrive for standby, and after each use. When you check your pack, put your hands on everything. Make sure you know it, look at it, listen, feel, know when things are working right, know what to do when they go wrong. You have to own it. Fourth, remember your bottle is not full until it is cold and full. A resting or cooling period is critical after your bottle is filled. It is your responsibility to double check the bottle pressure after a cooling period. And also know this. Fire Engineering published a study that revealed analog gauges can be misrepresented or misinterpreted on average by over 200 psi, and this always has to be taken in consideration in regards to your bottle pressure. Fifth and finally, we are looking for an alarm-free fire ground. It is our goal to see the days of routinely hearing low air alarms on the fire ground come to an end. For most of us, the sounding of low air alarms at fires is routine and something we don't pay any attention to. An alarm means something is wrong, and it shouldn't be ignored. By removing false alarms, the sudden introduction of the alarm on the fire ground becomes anything but routine. It becomes an incident to be investigated instead of ignored. You need to find out, is your partner in peril? Is the firefighter next to you with their bell ringing in some form of trouble? Many firefighters would be alive today if we'd mandated this action from the start. By adhering to the NFPA 1404 and adopting these 5 elements, the majority of air management problems are solved without expensive training programs, without adding new equipment, and you don't have to add any more personnel. I bet your fire chief's going to like that. departments are realizing they can transform their air management program without breaking the bank. And in the end, you will be safer and your effectiveness and teamwork on the fire ground will be greatly improved. We'll work better together and we'll do it safer.
NFPA 1404 cannot stand as an empty promise. It is essential that it's supported from the top down and that our SOPs reflect the operational realities that our members face. Commando officers, you need to ensure that you have adequate tactical reserve in order to trade out companies so that our companies can effectively, efficiently, and safely manage their air. While operating at a fire at Yale, I fell at the bottom of a stair shaft. And as I hit the bottom, my mask became dislodged. I took a nasty feat of smoke and I was trying to get my mask back on. When I got my mask back on my face, I was doing kind of a push-up to get myself off the ground when Captain Bobby Gahuli fell on top of me, ripping all the muscles off my shoulders. At that point in time, I was faced with the potential for a serious out-of-air emergency. I didn't know where I was in the structure, I didn't know which way to go, and I was just very fortunate at that point in time that there was a company operating in the area that found us within seconds. The point of this story is that you can do everything right and still find yourself jammed up on this job. I was only on air in this fire for a couple of minutes when I fell. That's why I'm very passionate about survival technologies such as filters and bailout technologies. But remember, those are only a last resort. If our departments adopt NFPA 1404 and it's supported from the top down, we will minimize the need to use those technologies.
Before we learn about the rule of air management, let's discuss the concept of air consumption. Air consumption is about understanding your body, how it uses air, and how you consume bottled air. Simply put, you can't manage your air on the fire ground until you understand how it's consumed. When SCBA manufacturers first rated the bottles, the time designations were based on air consumption rates of 40 liters per minute. Recent studies have confirmed that firefighters use a great deal more than 40 liters per minute when they are engaged in firefighting. No surprise there. In fact, you are likely to burn 100 to 120 liters per minute during fireground operations. That might help you explain to the boss why that 30-minute cylinder only lasted you about 12 to 15 minutes. Your overall fitness has a huge impact on how your body uses oxygen. For instance, a very muscular firefighter may be very strong, but those same muscles are going to require a lot of oxygen when they're working. Therefore, that firefighter should expect to go through a bottle in a shorter period of time. On the other hand, a leaner firefighter who engages in cardiovascular fitness training will last longer on a bottle. We're going to show you how 8 firefighters learned about air consumption. The Cyanide Poisoning Treatment Coalition conducted the Riley breathing technique study on firefighters of various ranks and ages. Each firefighter wore full PPE and walked on a treadmill at a steady 3 miles per hour. They used fully calibrated 30-minute 4,500 psi bottles that were filled to 1,000 psi. Firefighters were told to breathe naturally for 15 minutes or until they ran out of air. Before they started the evaluation, we asked them how long they would last on that amount of air.
On 1,000 psi, I would, on average, last about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes.
I would estimate 1,000 psi will maybe last 5 minutes.
If I had to guess, 3 minutes, 1,000 psi bottle.
Here are their baseline results. As you can see, the firefighters made 1,000 psi last anywhere from 7 minutes and 28 seconds to 12 minutes and 15 seconds. There can be a significant gap between expectation and reality. During the second part of this evaluation, the firefighters learned the Riley breathing technique, or humming method, also known as the RBT. This technique is proven to increase firefighters' time on air. A typical breath cycle lasts about 6 seconds. Watch the distance covered while performing a typical breath. Utilizing the RBT, one can typically double a breath in excess of 12 seconds by simply humming on exhale. After learning the RBT, the firefighters repeated the same exercise. All firefighters saw improvement using this method, including one firefighter who realized an increase of almost 3 minutes of usable air.
Yeah, I heard it was over 3 minutes longer than my first round, so yeah, that's impressive, and I think it's very effective, and it works.
In addition to increasing time on the bottle, improvements in heart rates and blood pressure were also revealed, in spite of this technique being brand new to them. The thing to keep in mind is that no matter what breathing technique you adopt, firefighters need to discontinue the practice of utilizing any method that requires you to hold your breath, such as skip breathing. If you hold your breath, carbon dioxide will build up in your bloodstream. When you start to breathe again, your body's physiological response will be to increase respirations. You will breathe faster. While these improvements were seen in a controlled setting, they will translate to actual fireground operations. It's important to note that breathing techniques are not always possible, especially when you're doing strenuous work. The goal is to utilize them when you can to better conserve your air and make the most of the time available for safe interior operations. When the SCBA was introduced, firefighters did not utilize them properly, and those that did were mocked.
Some of the issues were just with the mechanics of it. The mask wasn't really accessible early on. We had one mask on the top of our, we're going back to the days when you rode on the top of the pumper in the hose bed, getting dressed on the way to the fire scene, and there was one mask. And usually I was competing with another fellow for it. Now, when I got on the New York City Fire Department, things were a little different. It was 9 years later. I knew about masks. I knew the value of masks. I had learned how to do firefighting without masks. We used to go from window to window, and you would take a breath at each window. You knew where your fresh air supply was coming from, and you kept your nose glued to the floor. You were sucking the nails out of the floorboards as you crawled along. By 1979, things had started to change. In the New York City Fire Department, the company I was assigned to, a very, very busy engine company, they had a company policy that said, the nozzle man and the backup man, the first two guys on the line, they will start the hose line to the seat of the fire without masks, while the third and fourth guys would get the masks and put them on and back you up and relieve you if you needed to, which goes back into the 60s and 70s when the masks were in boxes on the side of the truck. But by 1979, we had the masks in brackets either behind our seat or next to our seat. And I was like, why am I getting off the truck without taking my mask when it's right there? Well, this is the way we always do things here. And I was like, this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. We had some really tough guys, but it came to be proven that no matter how tough you are, you can't go as far as you can as the guy with the mask can. It's just impossible to do.
So let's talk about the Rule of Air Management, or the ROAM. It's a foundational component of a progressive air management program, and the great thing is, it's simple. Know how much air you have in your SCBA and manage that air so that you leave the hazardous environment before the low air alarm activates. In simple terms, know what you've got, manage it as you go, and leave before your bell hits. In the hostile work environment, there are no do-overs. You need enough air to exit safely. Just like the scuba divers who must return to the surface slowly, you must have an escape plan and know how long or how much air it will take you to exit. You simply can't stay in the building until your tank is empty and then expect to hold your breath for 6 minutes on your way out. You will breathe smoke, and the odds have now been upped that you will die. In fact, many scuba divers have told us they'd rather run out of air underwater than lost in a fire. Because underwater, at least they know where the air is. It's up. If you're lost or trapped in a fire, finding a good source of air is not that simple. Not only is it critical to know how much air you have to periodically check your air while you're working. Your lungs are not designed to breathe water, and they certainly are not designed to breathe smoke. So actively manage your air. And this includes knowing what you've got, managing it as you work. We manage every other resource on the fire ground, and your air should be no different. Think about it as an apparatus operator. Don't you manage your water? As an IC, you manage your resources with the ICS system. You don't just go to the fire ground and hope that everything works out okay. We manage every other resource, and you need to manage your air. It is the only tool that will allow you to perform your tasks. There are an estimated 8 to 12 breaths per 100 pounds of air pressure in a 30-minute cylinder. Truly, every breath counts.
The concept of air management, why is that critical today? It's critical today because what we're facing is far more dangerous than what we faced yesterday. And I think I can accurately say that if what I'm facing today is more dangerous than yesterday, I think we might be able to say that what I'm going to be facing 5 or 10 years from now is more dangerous than what I'm going to be facing today. I mean, I think that's an accurate reflection. And so why is it critical? I think it's critical for our longevity and for our safety. That's why it's important. If we all agree that breathing smoke today is not the thing to be doing from a health and a safety issue, and it's not, then I think to dovetail in with that, the ability to manage our air so I can do the job that I need to do, but still have a reserve amount of air left to safely get me out of the structure so I don't have to breathe smoke, is critical.
Air management's an interesting time in our lives. And let me use the word lives again, because it's the only time, really and truly, there may be a few exceptions to it medically, but where we know exactly what our life expectancy is. Because when we put an SCBA on and we go into a IDLH hazard area, is we're going to live within the framework of the air supply that we have in that tank. That's a pretty compelling set of conditions when you sort of think about it. Is to say, if you've got 14 minutes of air left, you're going to live 14 more minutes. Whoever is trying to figure out whether they should or they shouldn't ought to kind of ponder, whatever firefighter is, sort of ponder that. And this is the business about running out of air, about being stupid with reserve air supplies, is to say that is necessarily, and we ought to put it in those terms. In fact, maybe we ought to say that more. Is that just simply your life expectancy? Come on the radio and say, Engine 1, you have 14 minutes to live.
To start, check your mask at the beginning of your shift and again prior to entering into an IDLH atmosphere. Second, make sure you have a full cylinder. Your bottle has to be full. We talked about this earlier. If you don't have air, you can't survive. Remember, your air supply is very limited. Third, firefighting is an intense and stressful job. You need to keep your cool under pressure. If you are calm, your breathing will be slow and controlled. You must focus and control the situation. Otherwise, the situation is definitely going to control you. So let's talk about what to do once we get on scene. Once you've been given an interior assignment, your preparation and readiness will set you up for early success. Most departments are now advocating some form of buddy check prior to entering the IDLH. We recommend a ready check. The ready check was developed by Seattle firefighters and is based on numerous line-of-duty death and injury reports. These reports showed a pattern of firefighters getting into trouble on the interior due to problems that should have been addressed before they entered. Trying to fix a problem in zero visibility is difficult, especially when it could have been addressed outside. The ready check addresses problems such as being on the wrong radio channel or not being correctly masked up prior to entry. To put it simply, you're either ready or you're not. The R in ready check is for radio. Ensure that every member on your team has their radio turned on, that it is turned to the correct channel, and that everyone knows to whom they are reporting. The E is for equipment. Ensure everyone has the appropriate equipment for the task they've been assigned. The A in ready check is for air. Do a quick air check to ensure everyone has a full bottle. This is a key component of the roam and gets your whole operation off to a good start in regard to air management. The D is for duties. Ensure every member of the crew knows the assignment and their role in that assignment. Once on the interior, communication gets increasingly difficult. The Y is simply yes. If you can answer yes to all of the above, you are ready to enter. If not, fix the problem before it catches up with you in the middle of the hazard zone. This simple check can be done in seconds and will eliminate many problems that have caused injury and death at fires.
First big job in Seattle was great fire. I can still remember the look and the feel of it. It was actually a battered women's shelter, and so it was a big, huge house that had been converted into a bunch of rooms. Fortunately, we got all the ladies out of there, but the entire second floor was just rolling. And as the captain and I went up the stairs, I actually ended up being on a hand line, even though I was on the truck that day. I ended up on a hand line with the captain, and we are trying to make it up the stairwell. Can't make it. They can't get the roof opened up, and there's orange just blowing all across, and we are putting water on it, and I thought I was going to die. It was awesome. I was in seventh heaven. For about 30 seconds, and the captain got tired of me having all the fun. Said, "Kid, give me the nozzle." And obviously I'm a recruit at that point. I'm not brave enough to say I come with this nozzle cap. So I gave the captain the nozzle. He started fighting the fire. The water was going up into where the fire was, and it was coming back down scalding hot. I had just come out of recruit school, so I was geared up right. My flaps were down. I was completely covered. The captain's flaps were rolled up, and the scalding hot water came down, and the next thing I hear is, ah! And I got the nozzle back. And as I'm snickering as we're fighting the fire, that's a day I'll never forget. And it reinforced do the right stuff. Every single day, suit up, mask up, do the right stuff. And I got that message emphasized to me on the first fire I had.
Okay, now that we're set to enter and go to work, the Rome states that you should manage your air as you proceed with your tasks. This may seem like common sense, but if it is, it's not all that common. I don't recall in the first 15 or so years of my career ever checking my air as I did my tasks. I either finished my task or was forced out of the building because I ran out of air. Many of you watching can probably relate to that exact same story.
We're responding, and it's pretty close to quarters, and we know we're going to a working fire. And I get off the rig, and I didn't check the facepiece. And we get there, and the chief is really upset, excited. We got people trapped, and he said, "John, get up to the top floor. I know we got people on the top floor." The front hallway is blocked by fire. They firebombed the front staircase, so the only way up was to go up the fire escape. So I go up the fire escape, and I kick in the window, and I'm about to go into this third floor apartment, and I go to put my facepiece on, and it's not there. And I've got this regulator in my hand, no mask attached to it, and I'm like, now what? And I said, well, okay. I started doing this without wearing a mask. I know the routine. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna get some fresh air, I'm gonna go from window to window. So let me go. So I go in, and my team is behind me, and I get about 5 paces, and I get a whiff of what's burning. It's plastic burning now by the 90s. And all of a sudden, I'm not going anymore. So I decide, all right, we're gonna try this again. And let's go back to the original window, get some fresh air. And I try to make it the next bedroom over, and it doesn't happen. There's just too much smoke, and it's too far to go to get to my next window. So I'm retreating back to my original window again and get some more fresh air. And basically what happened is I searched that same area within 10 feet of that window 3 or 4 times and didn't do anything else for that entire apartment. There are 5 other rooms that I never got to. Fortunately, my search team, the rest of the team, got there. They walked over me like I wasn't even there. I mean, it was just incredible how limited my effectiveness was by not having the mask. It's just, you can't do it. I don't care how tough you think you are, you can't do what you can with the mask on. And I've seen it time and time and time again with tough guys.
Understanding the strenuous nature of our work makes it challenging to find time to check our gauges. Here are some gaps in the action that might help your efforts. Check your air at the completion of a task. If the task is particularly strenuous, you may have started with sufficient air, but a heavy workload will rapidly deplete it. Check your air anytime you change a level, such as going up or down a flight of stairs. This is critical because changing levels increases the difficulty of egress or rescue if you should get in trouble. Check your air anytime you change a room or move to a new area within the structure. This is easy to remember, and it's a good time to determine if you can actually complete the task you've been assigned or if you need to pass it off to another company. Check your air during rest periods. This is a great time to check your gauge, and you can also recommit to your breathing technique as you pause. Progress reports are a great time to check your air. This is logical because you've already paused from what you were doing, and you can simply check your air as well. Doing incremental checks of your air status will enable you to make a great time to exit decision, help the incident commander with more timely crew placement, and keep you from being surprised by possible mass problems such as leaks. Since we just talked about doing progress reports, let's stay there for a minute and show how they can easily be integrated into your air management program. If you look at line of duty death reports, you'll see all kinds of reasons, including smoke inhalation and hydrogen cyanide poisoning, as a cause of firefighter death. Many times those situations are attributed to poor or faulty communication. Having a system of communication from the inside to the outside in partnership with your air management program is truly a win-win. The use of a CARA report does that. Here's how it works. During your operations and when appropriate, incident commanders should receive ongoing reports that include the following information. The C in CARA is conditions, telling them what you've got. The A is actions, what you're doing. The R is resources, what you need. And the air is for an air check of the crew when appropriate. As the officer or team leader, it is your responsibility to communicate the air status of your crew. Doing so will increase integrity of your crew and overall accountability on the fire scene. The final part of the roam states that you must exit the hazardous environment before your low air alarm activates. The air that's left over after your low air alarm rings is the emergency reserve. Just like scuba diving, it is intended for the breather, for the wearer of the mask, not for doing additional work. The emergency reserve should be kept intact for that unexpected floor collapse, getting lost, or some other firefighter emergency. It is what will give the RIT time to come find you when you can't get out on your own. If the roam is in place, you will not be using emergency reserve for fireground activities. This can be most challenging for the fire service as you accept the need to commit to air management. The fire service got off to a bad start with SCBAs, and one of the worst results of that is the notion that we can use the emergency reserve for normal fireground activities. This mistake has had a devastating effect on firefighter safety and survival.
It was December 23rd. Our station was dispatched to a residential structure fire. Our truck company, who arrived on scene, was ordered to cut 2 ventilation holes. Once they came down from cutting the holes, they reported that there was heavy fire on the 2nd floor of the home. And so myself and my lieutenant, we worked our way up to the top of the landing, stair landing. Due to some real heavy heat and very intense fire, we were not able to proceed much farther than 4 or 5 feet into the room. After a few minutes of firefighting, my lieutenant's air alarm began to sound as well as mine. And we began to make proceedings to move out, to go out of the room. About that time, our relief began coming up the line. And as I shut the line down, I began to make the transition. And as I was moving away, I somehow got my glove caught up in the relief man's air pack assembly. When I freed myself, I turned to where I thought the stairwell was and hit a wall. At that point, I realized I was turned around, and I don't know if I had enough air to try to find or locate the stairs. Kind of turned back to my right, and I saw some lighter smoke, and I assumed that had to be a window. When I got to the window, still very low visibility, very high heat. I removed my regulator to call for a ladder, but the smoke was very, very hot, very intense, and I had to put my regulator back in. There was a ladder that had just been placed, or had been placed sometime right just to the side of the window. I didn't see it. My facepiece was damaged. At that point, I knew I was still not safe, so I proceeded to climb out the window. And at that point, another firefighter in the room saw what was going on and grabbed my leg and slowed me down from actually possibly falling completely down the 2nd floor. At that point, my lieutenant had made it to the stairwell, actually ended up catching me as I was coming down, and we exited the structure. I had 2 or 3 breaths of air, I think, left in my regulator, or my air pack. At that situation, when I hit the wall and I realized I'm off the line, and I don't know exactly where the stairwell is. I'm close, I know I am, but I can't find it. Yes, there's a sense of almost panic, but of a real sense of urgency. And when I made it to the window, and then of course I took that one breath, which literally was like getting punched in the stomach. It was so hot. It was a very almost surreal experience. And it happened very quickly, and it can happen very quickly. And really before you, I think, realize it's happening. And so there's a real sense of, I can't believe this is happening to me.
Before really committing to proper air management, I never exited the structure prior to my alarm going off. And even then, I waited as long as possible, even running out from time to time. Most of the time, there were so many bells going off, I didn't even know it was mine until the mask sucked to my face. That's a very bad way of doing business. The emergency reserve should be saved for the worst day of your life. By determining that you will be out of the IDLH before your bell hits, you keep the emergency reserve intact for the day you are truly going to need it. The difference between getting jammed up without air versus having air cannot be overstated. Having air gives you two key advantages that will have a dramatic impact on whether or not you survive the incident. Number one, it allows you to make good decisions on the interior when you're in trouble. And number two, it gives the rapid intervention team time to get to you if you can't get yourself out. Listen to this clip from the Charleston sofa fire and see if you notice a difference between firefighters caught in the same situation who have air versus those who don't.
A black smoke was coming from the back of the building, banking down to the ground on the Savannah Highway. So we knew it was a bad fire right when we was pulling up.
As Kilcoyne suited up, what he didn't know was how close he was about to come to death.
When you got 5 foot into the door, it just turned to jet black. So I was kind of dragging my foot on the hose and then reached down, picked the hose up. And I worked my way all the way to the back.
Kilcoyne was on the 6th engine to arrive. At least 9 firemen were already inside in the back of the building. Once he got there, he cut to the left, breaking away from the hose. He began hacking away at a wall looking for fire. He didn't see any flames, but the heat was growing more intense.
Somebody come from the left side of me and grabbed me and said that I'm low on air and I'm lost.
Seconds later, a second firefighter grabbed him, then a third, then a fourth. Their face mask alarms were vibrating, signaling their tanks were on empty. They were disoriented and in panic mode.
With all that commotion going on, I was kind of lost at the time. And I went to back up and I got into the furniture for a little bit, and then I knew I didn't want to go that way.
Kilcoyne started walking in circles until he found the hose. At that very moment, another firefighter found him.
He said, I'm lost, I'm fixing to run out of air, I'm fixing to run out of air. He just kept on saying he's fixing to run out of air.
The 2 men used the hose to guide them, but they were going the wrong way. Seconds later, they spun around and crawled until they could hear the engines outside. The smoke was rolling out of the building. Kilcoyne went back in, but he didn't make it far. He ran directly into his captain, who was out of air. Kilcoyne pulled him out, then checked his own air tank. 6,000 pounds. Less than 6 minutes, he called for another tank.
He changed my Scott bottle out, I stood up, and the whole building lit off from one end to the other.
Knowing their men were trapped inside, Kilcoyne and others tried to make another attempt. The blaze was too far out of control.
It all happened in, like, I bet you 3 seconds. It felt like 10 minutes, but it was like 3 seconds.
Good air management integrates smoothly into all elements of the fire attack and makes for better incident command and improved situational awareness. This overall approach has been proven to work in departments across the country and will have a significant impact on both the short and long-term survival of your members. Like anything you do, you won't do it well if you don't train actively and realistically.
I was in an ambulance on the way back from a call from delivering a patient at the hospital, and we were headed back to the station when we heard a lot of radio chatter, multiple alarm fire. Battalion Chief John Tvetin was trapped in a warehouse, and he was slowly running out of air. The scene was extremely chaotic, and you could tell just from the voices, including Tvetin's voice, that he was in a very dire situation. Essentially, he ran out of air. There was a lot of assistance being thrown his way, but when you really boiled down the situation, he simply ran out of air. After the experience with With Chief Tibetan's incident, I kind of made it a personal mission that I was going to do whatever I could if I was ever in a leadership position to prevent that from occurring. Since rules of air management, those near misses that are related to air management have essentially gone away completely. We haven't had any. That was a seamless and very well embraced change by the organization. And what I've seen over the years is that people, colleagues, are actually catching their coworkers and reminding their coworkers that, are you checking your air? When we call for a status update from a crew that's working on the interior of a structure fire, not only do we get the status of the conditions and their location, but we also get their level of their air, the lowest level of their crew in a percentage. Those are requirements that never used to exist that really morphed out of our implementation of the Rules of Air Management program. It really brings the reality of this situational awareness to another level. We all recognize that tradition can be a huge hurdle to overcome when implementing any new program. The difference between this program and just about any other type of out-of-the-box program is there is a lot of assistance and a lot of experience out there. You've got the Seattle Fire Department, our fire department, Yakima Fire Department, departments all across the country, large and small, that are having success and saving lives with this program. It just takes an email, pick up the phone, ask questions. Our experience is something that I think is beneficial for everyone else.
Even after implementing solid air management protocols and taking all precautions, you're still going to be subjected to toxicants created by the combustion process. Many firefighters are dealing with the realization that giving their all to their communities doesn't necessarily mean they will be taken care of in their hour of need. You may assume that because you are risking your life to save others, your employer will take care of you when you get sick. But that assumption is proving nightmarishly wrong for many firefighters across the country.
Well, I think the most important points in Shane's story is that no matter how big you are, no matter how well developed your lungs are, that might be the gas combination that's the right one to take you down. And you don't know. Just because somebody else can walk through something and it doesn't affect them, doesn't mean that the next firefighter, it's not going to drop like third period French. The other problem is that we don't know what it's doing cumulatively. In other words, we don't know how many time bombs have been planted into how many firefighters over the years and where those bombs have been planted. Has that carcinogen gone into your pancreas or your stomach? Is it in your lungs? Are you absorbing it through your skin? Just because you're not, remember that the absorption is not just through your mouth and your nose, it's through your skin. So, if your gloves are off or you've got skin exposed anywhere, those toxins are going in your body, whether it's cyanide or a myriad of other horrible gases. And it's not just structural firefights. We know that the gases produced in wildland firefighting are as equally deadly.
And I noticed that some of the people that were exposed to a lot of that they would retire maybe 30 years on the job, and then when a couple years later, they were dead because primarily of cancer. And that caught my attention a little bit in that here's people that work for 30 years and they retire and they expect to spend maybe another 20, 25 years doing what they want to do and what they would like to do, but then their life is cut short because of the subject we're talking about.
Many states are adopting presumptive legislation to address your rights to medical treatment for disease and illness related to on-the-job exposures. As always, the devil is in the details of just what is and is not deemed job-related. For instance, heart and lung presumptive legislation exists in only 43 of the 50 states. 26 states have cancer presumption legislation, just 26. Every state differs regarding the specific illnesses covered. Variances include volunteer versus career, length of service, working versus retired, and many, many more. No two states are the same, and it's up to you to know your local legislation. And it's up to you to take care of your fellow firefighters. There is a growing recognition that proper use of equipment and adherence to operating guidelines and policies will be more closely monitored because of personal liability associated with presumptive legislation. A claim for an injury or exposure will be judged based on how you operated and if you used the safety equipment provided by your department. Much like discussions centered on the use of seatbelts, proper use of SCBAs, and adherence to respiratory guidelines will be expected in personal liability. Deviation from these guidelines exposes you to personal liability, therefore it's up to you to know and understand your local legislation and your department's policy and operating guidelines.
I remember going to compactor fires in public housing developments where it's nothing but garbage burning. And it's plastic garbage. And because it was only considered to be a minor fire, in the old days, people would say, we don't need a mask for this, come on, it's only a compactor. And the atmosphere was deadly, but the attitude was more deadly. The attitude was getting us hurt or killed. And finally, people realized, wait a minute, why are we breathing in garbage? I mean, there's no challenge to it except to kill yourself. So yeah, absolutely. In the last 25 years, attitudes have changed dramatically. Unfortunately, I wish that I had that first 15 years back.
So there you have it. The need for a change in the way you do air management is clear due to the many firefighters that are perishing due to asphyxiation and smoke inhalation across the country.
It might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, but it's going to take your life away. Frank Brannigan years ago, brilliant firefighter, brilliant man, said, know your building, know your enemy. Today, we have to take it a step further. Know your buildings and know what's in your buildings. Understand your enemy. Your enemy is the fire dynamics, the thermal, and it's the smoke, it's the toxicity. We have to start, the cancers we're seeing today are the tip of the iceberg. You know, we label a lot of what I consider to be heart attacks and stress-related deaths inappropriately. I think that those men and women got exposed to smoke particulates or smoke concentrations that didn't take them out right then and there, but either suppressed their respiratory or their cardiovascular or insulted them in some way which wasn't immediately apparent. They got tired. We always hear the story where the guy goes to a smoky fire or a gal goes to a couple of jobs, they go home, they lay down and take a nap, and they don't wake up. What happened?
This program is truly done in homage to the lessons we've learned from their lives. The mandate is clearly defined in the NFPA 1404 and the many legal rulings that are now holding firefighters accountable for the actions they take on emergency scenes. The solution is the rule of air management. Combining the ROAM with improvements in your air consumption training will dramatically alter the way your firefighters view and utilize the air they bring to the firefight. And now it comes down to you. You have the facts, and they are clear and compelling. You've heard from some of the most respected voices in the fire service that air management should be a priority in your training and operations. But as with everything, it comes down to what you do from this point forward. This program has laid a foundation that is proven and doable. The next step is for leaders in the fire service to determine that they are no longer going to watch their firefighters run out of air, suffer smoke inhalation, and asphyxiate at fires. They're not going to continue with failed policies that contribute to increasing firefighter cancer statistics and more firefighter funerals. During this week of filming, I lost a great friend and one of the best chief officers the fire service has ever known to brain cancer. He and many others like him provide the motivation for us to tell you the truth and give you the tools to make a change. Now, you certainly are going to encounter resistance from some members in your department, as change is often tough in our business. Consider the consequences and the tragic results of doing business as usual. We are drawn to this profession out of a compelling desire to belong to something that is bigger than ourselves, something so meaningful that it cannot be accomplished alone. That sense of duty should translate into a zero-tolerance attitude towards anything that is going to cause harm to the brothers and sisters with whom we serve. The old way of managing air, it's wreaked havoc on our profession. With your leadership and commitment, we can make the necessary changes to ensure that future generations of firefighters will have an air management program that actually works. Thanks for watching the program. Be safe, train hard, take care of each other.